Hello friends, in this video we're going to look at this Onkyo AV receiver. This is model TX-SR505. I don't know a lot about it so far. Picked it up at a thrift store for $14.99 with probably a 20% coupon discount. Based on the back of it, I know that it's a 7.1 type system. It also has different logos of trademarked features it incorporates. We've got feature set that's basic here, multi-channel DVD, VCR, DVR, and matching that up with the back, we can date this to about, I believe, 2010. That's kind of a guess. Haven't researched it. I haven't plugged this in yet, so we're going to do that next. Do some basic tests on it and see what happens. Then later in the video we're going to go inside. If there's anything wrong with it, we may fix it, or we may end up scrapping it out if it's hopelessly broken. But my experience with these from thrift stores is they're almost always good. I think people are fairly good about not giving something to a thrift store that they know is broken. So I've had pretty good luck with this kind of equipment. Before we actually try it out, let's look at the back to give us some idea of the features and the vintage. So feature-wise, we've got a pair of surround back speakers, surround speaker, front speakers, and center. So this is a 7 channels right there. We've got the subwoofer output, which makes it 7.1. They've got what looks to be an alternative connection for the front speakers. This has a small number of HDMI ports, 2 in and 1 out. Newer units typically would have more of those, 3 or 4 inputs probably. This has component video here. This is Super VHS or SVHS video here, and composite audio. We've got some optical inputs and digital inputs for coax. So the video output set, as well as the features that we saw on the front having to do with DVDs and VCRs, tell us that, what do they tell us, Scooter? Tell us that this is kind of in the transitional period where analog video was still an important thing, but that digital video, and which is kind of HDMI based now, was kind of a transition. So my guess, based on the features, is maybe we're about 10 years old, putting us back to about 2010, and we'll see if I'm right later on after I do some research. So in terms of size, this is a pretty hefty unit. 7 channels, probably has a lot of power capability for output power. It may still be useful with just these minimal HDMI outputs. People tend to expect those nowadays, and I'm seeing a lot of older AV receivers come through thrift stores that don't have those. And what's here could be considered maybe minimal or bare bones. But the honest truth is, and I want to make a separate video about this, is really if you've got digital inputs, particularly optical, that's all you really need. And just let your TV do the switching. So next we're going to plug it in and try it out. Scooter just found a bad capacitor that I took out of another unit. Makes a pretty good kitty toy. Right, Scooter? How do we know it's a bad capacitor, Scooter? Because it says bad on it, and it also has a swollen top. That was how I knew to focus on that one. Is that fun, Scooter? I was kind of wondering what I would do with that capacitor. Now I know. So first step, we'll do my normal smoke test. I'll turn this on. We've got about 120 volts coming out of the wall. We'll switch this to watts setting. I heard the unit click. It's running over 50 watts in an ambient mode, which I actually think is kind of high. Oh, it's turned itself on already. Okay, so that makes sense. So let's go to standby. That drops this into the small number of watts range. Actually down to 0, it appears. So maybe it's kind of running off of its stored power supply power for the moment. Turn it back on. Go back to what I saw before. The display looks good. CD min, we might as well push the buttons and see if those correspond. So that's all good. I haven't hooked up anything at all to this so far, so I'll begin to hook up the antenna and some speakers I have. I hooked up FM dipole antenna through this converter and a standard AM loop antenna. Turn it on. Let's go to tuner. We should be able to see a oh, okay, this is how you do tuning. So we should see an FM stereo indication at some point. Tuned. I'll go to a station that I know is good, which is 89.3. Auto and tuned. So that all looks good. I've hooked up some speakers and an audio source. This is called Robot Boogie by Quincus Moriera. Sorry if I got your name wrong. Let's see, we'll do aux. It's at min volume. It's coming out of these KLH speakers. So that's the A channel speakers. So you have turned those off. Back on. B channel speakers. So, oh, I see it has a helpful indication here of what speaker set you're using. Oh, I've got both now. Just B, there's nothing connected to B. So it's normal for it to be quiet. Now we should hear A sound. Okay, so far so good. Now let's go to tuner.
The logic was like, why invite the press that's all controlled by the government?
I've got a not so great antenna set up, so
if that's indeed was
the static you hear is really the antenna more than the receiver. Let's go to AM. I'm going to go up to 610, which I know is a station in this area.
Because you're going to get the same amount of games played every year. I mean, I'm going to take
which is a sports radio station, so we got a lot of talk and discussion here. So far so good. Looks like we're ready to go to some of the other features. Let's do tone. They give us a digital tone option. I'm going to set those to nominal. which is 0 dB. Looks like we have a range of plus and minus 10 here, and 2 dB steps. Back to that. So AM stereo. I guess this station supports stereo. Let's go back to our aux. This is something called Polo Loco by the same artist. Let's see. So there's some display options here. Mostly seeing a reflection of my hand. Let's turn off this light and see if that helps. Maybe a little bit. Let's just cycle through these others. Sound goes off as expected. Aux stereo, direct, theater, dimensional. So they've got, I've seen this on, I've worked with a couple Yamaha and Sony receivers, and this looks like what they have, which is a simulated surround sound effect for if you're using, you know, a stereo source and you want to fill all, in this case 7.1 of your speakers with something. Let's hit the display button here. It's giving us different options on display. Got our choice of digital input, 1, 2, optical. Let's try dimmer. So that kind of cycles through. It's like 3 dimming settings. Go back to full brightness. Memory tuning mode. Setup mic, I've seen this before on, I've got a Yamaha that helps you automatically set up the volume of each of the surround channels. So that all looks good so far. So everything is a success as what we've tested so far. Every reason to believe this is a good unit. So as our next stage, let's go ahead and pull the lid on this thing and go inside and see how it's. For our next stage, I'll go ahead and, for the next part of this video, I'm going to pull the lid on this, go inside and show you how it's constructed. This is kind of a standard setup for a receiver that I've seen. Side screws, there's usually ones on the back, and a lip here that catches. So I'll take all that out separately and we'll pull the lid. Scooter's in his kitty tent. We'll see if he stays there. You gonna stay there? I didn't think so. So let's pull the lid on this and see what's inside. I think I've got all the screws out, but sometimes I miss one. Okay, there we go. So let's see what we've got here. I'm seeing the kind of standard things that I'm familiar with. This is the standby power supply, main power transformer. This is AC in through the standby power supply, which provides a relay. That's so you can turn it on from remote control. This unit very likely has a remote control that goes with it, but that didn't come with my purchase. We've got the back panel interface. These are probably relays for maybe some sort of protection purpose. This is the RF module. We can tell because that's in a can and it connects to our antennas. Looks like that has a digital output that goes to this board. This has it says DSP on it, Texas Instruments, so that's the kind of the main audio processor of the whole thing. This is the HDMI interface board. It looks like all the interesting stuff is on the other side of that, so we can't really get a very good look from here. This is some kind of audio input board, I believe, and probably including the analog audio switching. You can see that it has its own separate power supply. Here's a full wave bridge rectifier, associated capacitor, probably power regulators. These are probably 3-terminal regulators or some other type of power transistor. This is probably the circuit that does the switching for analog, I would think. Got some connection cables. Going back to the power supply, we've got these 2 large capacitors that probably go with the main audio power supply. You can see a lot of repetition here, and I'm going to count these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's our 7 channels. Looks like there's 2 power transistors per channel. This is probably a thermal sensor to make sure that it doesn't overheat. We get this large heat sink, which is designed for convection cooling. These things never have a fan in them because you don't want to hear the fan noise, but with the slots at the bottom and enough vertical fins, this can cool passively with convection cooling. Going back to the amplifier, if we just look at one stage, this white thing, typically those are power resistors, although I can't be sure. These may be some amplifier stages to drive the main power transistors, and we've got some miscellaneous small signal transistors and, you know, passive components, resistors, capacitors. And just visually speaking, you can tell that these are just repeated units, one after the other. This has the type of board construction I've seen in this type of unit. It has a one-sided PC board with a lot of these jumper wires, which kind of makes it the Bohrmann's 2-sided board. These larger transistors are just air-cooled without heat sinks, so they're probably not running a whole lot of power, but something is probably needed to boost the signal into the power transistors. Now, the last amp that I looked at was a Yamaha. I think it was RXV367. That's the one I ended up repairing with the capacitor that the cat was playing with. Or I actually took that one out of it and put a replacement in. But it had 2 integrated stereo amplifiers, and it was a 5.1 unit. Turn the receiver around, you can get a better look maybe from this side. Here's our power transistor area. Here you can see the front panel control board. I've seen this in other units. The Yamaha unit, I think, has kind of a major control IC that's mounted at a 45-degree angle. So I don't know if that works out better with the interconnects or what, but it's kind of an odd little quirk. Here's the phono board, this little board down here with a few passive components and a connector. And then here we've got another control board, which, looking on the front, oh, that's the basically the power switch and some associated circuitry, or they call it standby, but that's what it amounts to. So from sort of a macro point of view, this looks to be very well constructed. I think Onkyo is one of the sort of middle high end brands, maybe one notch in the hierarchy above Yamaha. In particular, the fact that they're using separate pairs of power transistors for each channel is a good thing. I'm not quite sure why the integrated amplifiers are not considered as good, but you know, there's a lot of opportunity for fine-tuning things in this type of discrete design. You can also see that there's one trim pot associated with each audio channel. So that's a plus. Transformer in this is approximately the same size as I've seen in other units of this kind of overall capability. So this has a lot of output power per channel, maybe more than you'd ever need in practice. The power rating on the back is almost 5 amps at 120 volts. So making it simple, that's close to 600 watts input power as maximum. And of course the actual power you draw is going to vary depending on how loud you run it and drive and so on. We saw that it takes approximately 50 watts when not doing much of anything but just actually on. So that's 50 watts to run the control board and whatever else is just kind of sitting there cooking. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. Do you think we should wrap it up, Scooter? Don't shock yourself. Okay, Scooter, we're going to wrap it up. Say goodbye to everybody at home. Thanks for watching. Say thanks for watching. Bye-bye.